Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. Today we're going to take a look at how I profile the scales or handles on my knives. Now Jason Northgard and I recently came out with a book called Introduction to Knife Making, the Beginner's Do-It-Yourself Guide to Making Knives. In that book, which is heavily illustrated, it covers everything, mounting the handles, but it also covers shaping or profiling those handles or scales. And that's what we're going to take a look at today. I like to work on a few knives at a time, anywhere from 3 to 6. And I do that because this way you just don't have to change the belt on the belt sander to change the grit so often. These are the knives that I'm going to be working on. And this video is really kind of simple. We're just going to cover the profiling of the handles. So we will have already mounted the handles to the blade with epoxy resin and pins. I cover that whole process on another video. And then we're just going to be profiling or carving those handles or grinding those handles down to the shape of the tang. Now I use a 2x72 grinder. You can use whatever grinder, whatever belt sander you have. This is a Oregon blade maker 2x72. It has a 2 horsepower motor, variable speed. I'm using a coarse grit belt. Actually, for this process, I either use a 36 or a 60 grit belt. And if you notice the work table that I'm on, I cut a notch in it so that it actually fits right around the belt. That comes in handy for a bunch of different projects. What I'm trying to do here is carve away, grind away the majority of the handle, excess material, so that just the metal starts to show up. In order to do the inside profiling, I move the belt over to the right-hand side of the screen, so that the belt actually overlaps past the flat platen of the grinder. That allows it to have kind of a soft edge and allows you to do those interior curves. And again, this is just rough shaping the profile. These particular scales were done by a friend of mine, Brad Hunt. They're a composite hybrid of epoxy casting resin as well as wood burl. This is actually another set of Brad Hunt scales, just a different color. Just going to show you the exact same process on the second knife I'm working on. And again, I didn't have to, change the platen or change the belt. I'm going to do, all of the knives that I'm currently working on, and I'm going to just rough grind the profile. This particular knife has a nice finger notch on the inner edge, and again, that overlapping the belt on the right-hand side of the platen really allows me to get in and clean up that handle material right down to its till the blade is completely exposed. Now these are all rough horizontal grind lines that I'm leaving not only in the handle material but also on the tang. Look at that inner curve which I was able to create just by overlapping that belt. One other set of scales that I'm going to show you. This is a set of scales by Rod Carper. Rob makes some really cool stuff. This one has not only wood burl cast in resin, but also turquoise. The problem with turquoise, or makes it a little bit harder to work with, is that I can't cut out the basic shape and get rid of the majority of the excess material on my pin or scroll saw. So with these scales, I have to grind away the majority of the material. If you notice, I actually cut the wood with the scroll saw and then just left the area that had the turquoise. But it's the same process. Coarse grit belt, 36 or 60. You're gonna grind the rough shape or profile of the scales. You're gonna leave very coarse grind lines horizontal, which we will clean up afterwards. of course, all of this is done after the pins had been ground flat so that you have flat surfaces uh, to hold that knife against the work table. All right, so the next step that I do, and like I said, most of this stuff, there's multiple ways of doing it. I'm just showing you the way I do it. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best way or the only way. I'm going to now um, grind off any excess material and reduce the width or the thickness of each scale as desired. This is a personal preference if you want thick scales or if you want thin scales. On these smaller knives, I like to thin down that 3/8 material a little bit. And I just do that on the flat platen. Then I'm going to clean up all of the horizontal grind lines by using the flat platen without the work rest and a finer grit belt. So if I started at a 60, I'm probably doing this at an 80. And then I will go, to 120 and 240 appropriately. In fact, you can actually, just continue going with that and go to 800 or 1200 and then put it on a felt belt and polish it. Whatever the end result is that you want. This is that second knife called the fish-eating fish design on the blade or etched design on the blade. And again, we're just cleaning up all of the horizontal grind lines with a finer grit belt. And this video, is not for the experienced knife maker. This video is really being made for the guy that's starting out. Sometimes I find that, seeing how something is done, is very helpful. In order to clean up those horizontal grind lines on the inner side of the handle, especially that curve or the finger groove, I use a small wheel attachment. This is a small wheel attachment from Oregon Blade Maker. It comes with a variety of different sizes, diameters that you can put on there. You do always want to slow down the RPMs when you're using a small wheel attachment. It just saves the bearings a little bit. And I'm just going to carefully look at the tang and make sure that every one of those horizontal grind lines is completely gone. And it's a process. A lot of times you have to change the belt and go to a finer grit or polish it. Sometimes you have to go back and go to a coarser grit. These are those Rod Carper turquoise and burl scales. And you see how fast this goes. I've just basically done 3 knives right now. Each step of this process does not take long. I think I spend more time, changing the tooling arm on the grinder than I do actually doing the work sometimes. Now, at almost every time you use the grinder, but especially on these scales, especially on the epoxy scales, you always want to wear a respirator. There's a lot of dust in the air, airborne contaminants. Now, really doesn't fall under profiling, but I do it basically at the same time. So after I've got the thickness of each handle to where I want them, I can actually round over that top edge of the scales right on, vertically, right on the flat platen of the grinder. Usually I do this with about 120 grit belt, and I'm just very, very careful not to hit the blade against the belt at all. The inner edge, I shape just with an orbital sander. There's a bunch of different ways of doing that. I'll cover that on a different video of actually carving and shaping and finishing the scales, polishing. But today's real fast video is really just meant to show you profiling. So again, one more look. This is the Rod Carper scales with the turquoise done the exact same way. Very, very carefully rolling that blade, holding it vertical on the flat platen, and just smoothing or rounding that sharp edge on the top of the scales, rounding it over. Just a very fast, easy way of doing it. And if you got 3 or 6 knives all lined up, you can run through all of them, within 5-10 minutes. Always make sure it feels good in the hand. And that's basically it. Here's a look at the finished knives that we were working on. These all happened to have blade etchings on them. I was working on a variety of different designs. Now, please join us on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Join us on our Facebook group, Knives and Knife Making. As I mentioned before, Jason and I recently published a book called Introduction to Knife Making, the Beginner's Do-It-Yourself Guide to Making Knives. That is available on my site, www.bergknifemaking.com, or you can get it direct off of Amazon. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much.